everyone. I am here to explain to you the social and behavioral issues which are relevant for understanding organizations and the behaviors that are within the organization and also outside the organization of their workers, their managers, and everybody who is related to organizations. For this, we need to understand a few things. Here, the first thing that we need to understand is the term organizational behavior. Now, which comprises of two things. One is the organization and the other is the behavior. The issues that are relevant here are the nature of people in organization, within organization, and also the nature of the behavior from a psychological point of view as well as from organizational point of view. The meaning of behavior has to be clearly understood by people and apply the knowledge towards understanding organization and the people behavior within the organization and outside. Now, organizations do not have a very clear-cut boundary, which we many a times think that the organizations are very closed system. They are not. They are continuously interacting with the environment. It has an interdisciplinary nature where the understanding of subjects like psychology, sociology, cultural anthropology, economics, political science, and others which stretch beyond the domain of the so-called organization. Now, the contexts and the behavior of people who are related to organizations, they are known as the micro OB, that is, in a very limited manner, the behavior is only restricted to what is happening in the organization. The other is macro OB, where the behavior and nature of organizations within their socio-cultural, political and economic environment are understood. Now, what is the import of this kind of understanding? When we say or understand the behavior within organization, we are just looking at the micro aspects. Just imagine an organization. It can be anything, a production organization, service organization. When people are behaving inside the domain of organization, then we are understanding the behavior from micro perspective. But when we take it outside the organization and its interaction, like for example, if you take the aviation industry. Now, aviation industry is just not aviation only. It has to look into the social aspects, economic aspects, cultural aspects, political aspects, all kinds of wide ranging aspects that are understood. Just to exemplify, in the current situation with this COVID-19 affecting us, the international flights are restricted or they were banned. Now, what is the impact of this kind of policy, which was unexpected but necessary? So, what is the issue here? Here we find that the people their business, their routine, all of it gets disturbed or differentiated at the personal level, at their family level, at the social level, and also economic level. Forget about the political level. So, here we are looking at the macro. So, we just cannot restrict the aviation industry only as aviation, pilots, planes and all that. It has a social import. This is where we need to understand the social organizations from social perspective. So, here please note that the social processes are important to both the micro and macro levels of organizational behavior. Now, this understanding is mainly supported by open system perspective and institutional perspectives. For example, long time back, Etzioni, he conceptualized the modern society as an organizational society, and the whole thing happened more than 70 years back, maybe more. The civilization, according to Etzioni, the civilization progresses through organized living. This organized living is coming from the organizational behavior, and organizations are a must in this kind of understanding the organization. The other perspective that we have is the resource dependence theory. The resource means that whichever source we draw or convert our energy, our behavior, our functions from. So, people are dependent on organizations. Organizations are dependent on people. Now, what does it mean? People are resources for the organization, and organizations are resources for people. Not only that, other organizations are also drawing their resources from their related or relevant or distantly relevant organizations. Let us come back to the old example of aviation industry. Aviation industry cannot survive without the tourism, and these agencies, even we have the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, these are drawing their resources from each other. The aviation draws resources from tourism, tourism draws its own energy from aviation. So, you can understand the interdependence regarding the resource. Without people, there is no industry. Without industry, society will not survive. For the society, it is the organizations which are its vehicles on which the society runs. Now, consequence to this independence and interdependence, we have to understand the effect and the constraints both, which are coming out of the social context. So, what I mean here is that the social context is affecting the people, the organizations, and in turn the social context is getting affected by people and the organization. Continuing with this open system perspective, we find that the energy is drawn from the social environment. And what happens next? The energy gets transformed in some kind of product, service, and this product and service doesn't remain static. It gets exported to outside, and there is a repetition of this cycle. This is basically the open systems perspective, is where we see the input which gets processed through throughput and there is an output. This output again affects the input. So, there is a constant interrelatedness between what we get, what we do and again what we get. So, this is there, the entire cycle gets repeated. Now, another concept that we have to understand is known as negative entropy. Entropy means death or the end. Here the reference is that the organizations, society, both should not be taken as static aspects which are not changing, and how this change takes place. There is an issue of negative feedback. Say for example, your body itself is an organization, physically as well as mentally. Now this, if you get the environment with a changing environment, hot or cold, the body gets affected, and if you are exposed to something which is negative or harmful, there is a negative feedback to the body and the body responds. Say for example, we have fever. If we get exposed to cold or some drastic change, we have fever. Fever is just an external symptom of something going wrong. That is the negative part. So, the information that we get from this is to correct the deviation from the normal, that is known as the course. The deviation, the correct deviation will put back the body in its own form, and there is a coding process that simplifies the energy and information and selection of repetition. What we get here is the fever as an external symptom which is indicating a deviation from the course, and then the medical treatment that is given is to not to just reduce the fever but to correct this system. So, this is the open system which is continuously interacting with the external, internal and putting the right kind of information to right place and taking correct sequence of action. But that does not mean that we are always in a flux. The negative entropy is an indication of a change, but change is not constant. We have to come to a steady state, otherwise the organization always will be in a flux. So, the steady state preserves the character of the system, a stable ratio of energy exchanges and the relationship between the different parts. Organizations in the social perspective and especially from open system perspective require the movement towards the direction of increasing differentiation. This differentiation, mind you, is very important because one organization cannot remain static forever in its own place. Say what the cars that you got in 60s is different from what we have today. So, the differentiation, what we require in that change is just not the scientific discovery, but there is a reason behind it. This is where the openness of the system is very important and gets gradually expressed in terms of elaboration or specialization. And you have to remember at this point that there is a constant operation of the principle of equifinality, which means that what is accepted for the time being is final for the time being, and the balance that is brought in this exchange is maintained through the temporary indications for change, and this change may be in terms of disorganization and disintegration which appear to us. Say again, I will come to the present circumstance of this infection, the whole epidemic that is happening. You have not faced this, the world has not faced this, but we are constantly in exchange with each other. The human being with the medical system with the political system with international system, like that the cycle goes on and with a purpose. This is where the open system perspective becomes very important for us to understand organizations. Organizational, let's come to organizational structure. Why it is important for any organization to have a structure? This structure is very important. One may think that by structure we are becoming static, but structure is required, whether you are in a political organization, manufacturing organization, economic organization, or institutions like university, colleges, schools, and so on. Structure is very important, but structure is not going to be forever. It keeps on changing, and that is what is pointed out by the open system. Now let's understand first why these structures are important. First thing that comes to mind is the legitimacy and the chances of survival of the organization. Now you have to have, legal system is not only the system which provides legitimacy. Legitimacy is provided by our society, by our politicians, by our economics, all these things. There are formal laws, customs, common knowledge, and action, not by individual choice, but by a broad range of social scripts, which is very important. And that is why I keep on emphasizing this social part, that without society there is no organization, without organization there is no society. And society is represented by the social scripts, which are norms, laws, formal, informal, customs, norms, which is not only contingent on individual but by a collective. So the organizations become the result of this collective process. The contents and the behavior of people who are related to organizations, they are known as the micro OB, that is, in a very limited manner, the behavior is only restricted to what is happening in the organization. The other is macro OB, where the behavior and nature of organizations within their socio-cultural, political and economic environment are understood. Now, what is the import of this kind of understanding? When we say or understand the behavior within organization, we are just looking at the micro aspects. Now we come to a new concept, which is of course not so new, but it's known as the neo-institutional model for understanding the society and organization. Now this neo-institutional model talks about a few things that are important. What is the main component of this? Here the perspective is that in this world, people are asking, what is the logic? What is reasoning? Why this is so? What is the purpose? We have to understand the reality, and we don't take things for granted, that we have to have the factories because they are required for the society, we have to have the multi-stories because there is a lack of space of living, everybody must have a house. The whole concept of building huge houses and many families, multiple families living there for generations is slowly getting obliterated. These are because we must have the consultative rules that create actors. That is, to clarify, is the new identities and entities which are specifying the behavior for action routines. And mind you, this action routine is not static. I am emphasizing this term that there is, if we go for static system, then we will be constantly bombarded with negative entropy. That is one aspect. Second is that for the sake of, for example, for profit. What is profit? Just increasing the bank balance of the industrialists or people? No. There has to be some rules, normative rules, and that must be internalized by actors. The best example that I know of is little old but still very, very relevant. Say the basic approach of initial state of Tatas and their buildings. The city of Jamshedpur was built by, you already know, Jamshedji Tata. Now this was a total norm that was established, meaning that if you are establishing an industry, there has to be people's quarters, living quarters. For that, one needs the roads, one needs the electricity, one needs all daily requirements. So this is a normative rule that has to be internalized. Those who live in these places, they must internalize those norms. Just for the latest example, wearing masks. I am right now not wearing it because of these circumstances, but now the Delhi, capital of India, had to impose a fine of 2000 rupees because people were not wearing masks. Why? Because the whole norm, the new norm that has been required by this endemic is not internalized. So, this is enforced, and this internalization must be reinforced by beliefs and others in the context. This is a holistic approach with a view to change our own self as well as others. So, normative rules, the first issue is that these needs to be internalized, and people, organizations should be ready to change. And third thing that happens is the enforcement mechanism, formal or informal. When informal didn't work, then the formal, the fine that was imposed. This is again from the organization to the individual, from the individual to the organization. Here we find surveillance, the police is becoming very active, who is wearing the mask or not. Assessment, what is happening. Transmission, maintenance and resistance, all are parts of the neo-institutionalist model, and the possibilities of these norms, they must be crystallized by the organizations. One thing we have to constantly remember is stability and change are to be balanced, which is expressed through the concept of isomorphism, which means that similarity in different organisms resulting from convergence. The various organisms, people, they must converge, and through this convergence, the stability and change and stability are, put in place. There is no need for getting into the forced compliance, coercive and mimetic, which is imitative response to uncertainty. It has to be normative. The whole thing is that the society environment are in constant exchange with each other. There are different interfaces, and which is explained by, in 70s the whole idea came, the socio-technical theory, which was proposed by Tavistock group, and which means that the society and technology must go hand in hand, and this is very important for continuity, stability as well as change, that is so significant for our human survival and social survival. And you see, there are various kinds of organizations which are homogeneous, heterogeneous, both can be stable and variable. Basically, the whole understanding is that we keep on re-understanding, reformulating, re-establishing the different rules and regulations. And it also can be due to variations in environmental conditions, and we keep on creating buffers through political, economic, social changes. And all the social changes is very important in the sense that we need to be having and living in a dynamic environment, not in a static environment. And the term static is not a substitute for stable. Static is derogatory and dynamic is something which is going towards the development and change, and there are few processes to this change is buffering, re-establishing, smoothing. Smoothing means we take out the differences, forecasting is for the future, and rationing, that is limiting our choice and productivity. Thank you so much.